They walked into the bank in daylight. No masks. No guns. Just papers that looked official. And yet, behind those papers was one of the boldest heists in Uruguay's history. Montevideo, 2021. To the outside world, these men looked ordinary. But under the surface, each of them carried a reason to risk everything. One was a former employee, discarded by the very system he once served. He knew the routines, the paperwork, the way guards trusted what was stamped and signed. Another was a fraud specialist, a man who could forge seals so perfect they fooled even the most meticulous clerks. The third, the quiet strategist. Patient, calculating, with a talent for making impossible moves look routine. They were not street criminals. They were professionals who believed in precision more than violence. And they understood a simple truth. In a world that trusts documents more than faces, the pen can open doors the gun cannot. What bound them together wasn't friendship. It was necessity. Debt, failure, the hunger to prove they could beat the system that had once beaten them. 4 months, they lived ordinary lives. Coffee shops. Bus rides. Smiles at neighbors. But behind those gestures, they studied blueprints, collected samples of official stamps, rehearsed signatures until they looked effortless. Every heist begins with a moment of silence. For them, that silence was the calm before the storm. It started with a single idea. Why break in with force when you can walk in with authority? The strategist drew the outline. If they could impersonate inspectors from the central bank, with papers so flawless that even seasoned security staff bowed to procedure, the vaults would open themselves. The fraud specialist worked in silence, bent over stamps and seals. He replicated the exact shade of ink, the pressure of a typewriter key, the faint watermark that only revealed itself under ultraviolet light. Every detail mattered. If even one mark was off, the plan would collapse. The insider fed them knowledge. Shift rotations. Guard routines. Which manager was easily intimidated? Which clerk never questioned paperwork stamped with urgency? He mapped out the invisible weak points, the cracks in trust. They rehearsed not like thieves, but like actors. Polished shoes. Crisp suits. Stern expressions. Their dialogue rehearsed word for word. Every movement choreographed to match the authority of real officials. The risk was enormous. Unlike guns and masks, forged documents left a paper trail. If caught, the sentence would be just as heavy. But without the chaos of a getaway car, there would be no room for excuses. Still, they believed the system itself was their greatest weapon. After all, banks fear regulators more than robbers. The day was chosen. An ordinary weekday morning, when the building buzzed with employees, when a surprise inspection would raise no alarms. Everything was set. What remained was the execution. Morning. The lobby of Banco Republica was already alive with the rhythm of routine. Clients queuing, tellers processing forms, guards scanning without suspicion. 3 men entered. Dark suits. Briefcases. Papers folded neatly in leather folders. They didn't rush. They didn't hesitate. They belonged. The leader approached the front desk first. He laid down documents stamped with seals that gleamed under the light. His tone was firm, bureaucratic, almost bored. "We're here on behalf of the central bank. Immediate audit. No delays." The guard looked at the papers, frowned for a moment, then nodded. The documents carried more weight than any ID card. Within minutes, the men were escorted past security, deeper inside the building. The fraud specialist held the file like a weapon. He flipped pages, pointing at codes, names, signatures that matched the bank's own registry. Each stamp echoed authority. No one dared to ask twice. Step by step, they advanced. Not as intruders, but as inspectors. Into restricted corridors. Through double doors. Until the steel vault stood before them. The insider's knowledge paid off. He knew which supervisor to pressure, which phrases to use. Regulation 24B. Compliance check. Immediate access required. It was all technical theater, and the staff fell in line. The vault opened. No alarms. No resistance. Just the cold hum of machinery and the silent rows of cash and valuables. Inside, every second mattered. They catalogued. They lifted. They filled the cases with a speed born of practice, yet always calm, never frantic. The trick was to look like officials doing their job. Minutes later, they walked back out the same way they had entered. No shots fired. No shouts. Only the soft echo of their footsteps fading into the ordinary noise of the bank. By the time the deception was noticed, the men were already gone. And so was the money. At first, everything looked flawless. The bank staff believed the inspection had been real. Reports were filed. Papers stamped. The men had walked out as if nothing happened. But perfection never lasts. The first crack appeared the next day, when an internal call reached the central bank. The supposed inspection didn't exist. The documents were not on record. Confusion turned to alarm. Managers retraced their steps, replaying the memory of the three officials who never were. Questions spread like fire. Who signed them in? Why was no one suspicious? Meanwhile, inside the crew, pressure began to grow. The strategist insisted on silence, on lying low until the dust settled. But silence is heavy. And money, too tempting to keep untouched. One member wanted his share early. Debts pressed him, collectors waiting at his door. His insistence cracked the unity. Voices rose. Trust weakened. The forger, proud of his perfect work, feared that one mistake could still betray them. He rechecked the stamps obsessively, replaying the operation in his head. Each flaw he imagined was another knot in his stomach. The insider, closest to exposure, knew the bank would trace back every face, every past employee, every connection. His nerves were raw. He changed phones. He avoided old haunts. But paranoia is hard to hide. Investigators were closing in. Surveillance footage. Witness statements. Timelines. The illusion of authority had vanished. Now it was a hunt. And within the team, the silence they had once trusted became a weapon turned inward. The police moved fast. Within days, the vault audit exposed the exact sum missing. News broke across Uruguay. Banco Republica had been robbed without a single shot fired. Detectives dissected security footage frame by frame. 3 men in suits. No masks. Clear faces. Calm movements. The very confidence that let them pass as officials was now the detail that doomed them. The insider was the first to feel the heat. His name surfaced in whispers among investigators. A former employee with motive, knowledge, and access. He went underground, cutting ties, but the net was tightening. The forger tried to vanish across the border. He carried a passport almost as perfect as his bank papers. Almost. At a checkpoint, a sharp-eyed officer caught the irregularity. One slip, and he was in custody. The strategist stayed longer. Careful. Patient. He rotated safe houses, hid the bulk of the cash. But paranoia corrodes judgment. A routine traffic stop, and his calm broke. The officer saw it in his eyes, in his shaking hands. Within hours, he too was under arrest. Inside interrogation rooms, the story cracked open. Not by confession, but by betrayal. One blamed the other. One denied everything, while another revealed too much. Trust collapsed, replaced by survival instinct. The money? Only fragments were recovered. Some hidden caches discovered by police, others gone without trace. Whether burned through debts, laundered abroad, or locked in secret vaults, no one could say for sure. The public watched in disbelief. How could a bank be robbed in daylight, with no violence, under the watchful eyes of guards? The answer was brutal in its simplicity. People trust paper more than they trust people. The hunt was nearly over. But one piece remained unresolved. Trials followed. The forger faced years behind bars. His perfect stamps and seals, once his pride, were now evidence stacked against him. The insider, exposed as the weak link, received the heaviest sentence. His knowledge of the bank's routines turned from advantage to condemnation. The strategist, the mind behind the deception, tried to argue that no violence meant no crime of terror. The court disagreed. Leadership brought him the longest punishment of all. But not all the money was ever found. Large portions vanished into the shadows, whispered to be hidden in safe houses, smuggled out of the country, or laundered through silent partners who were never caught. For the bank, the damage was more than financial. It was trust, shattered in front of the nation. Security systems were rebuilt. Procedures rewritten. Guards retrained to never again let paper outweigh instinct. And yet, The legend remained. 3 men, walking calmly through locked doors, carrying away millions without firing a single shot. No masks. No guns. Just signatures that lied better than any weapon. In the end, Banco Republica learned the hardest truth of all. The sharpest heist isn't made of steel or bullets, but of ink.